I really think that this is an exciting event. It is exciting because it honors people who are communicators, communicating the reality of life as it is for people who have disabilities.
The Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities presents the 38th Annual Barbara Jordan Media Awards 2021. Dr. Linda Livingstone, President, Baylor University, introduction and welcome.
Hello, it is my privilege to welcome each of you to the 2021 Barbara Jordan Media Awards. Congratulations to all of this year's awards recipients. Whether you're a high school student or a seasoned journalist with decades of experience, you should be proud of this accomplishment. I deeply admire the work you do to spotlight persons with disabilities in ways that bring them dignity and honor. As you know, these are men and women of tremendous ability. They see things from a different perspective than we do, and they are shining examples of perseverance, resilience, and heart. We have so much to learn from these individuals, and yet many of their stories have yet to be told. That's why the work that you do is so valuable. You are creating a more loving and inclusive world with the stories you tell and the way that you tell them. Your articles, broadcasts, photos, and documentaries demonstrate both an excellence in journalism and an awareness that people with disabilities are capable, valued members of our society. You are making a difference. Baylor University is honored to partner with Governor Abbott's office to host tonight's awards ceremony. At Baylor, we are deeply committed to diversity and inclusion. We welcome students, faculty, and staff of all levels of ability. And we believe our Christian mission compels us to love our neighbor and to treat all people with respect, dignity, and love. We're also inspired by the life and legacy of Barbara Jordan. Although she never attended or taught here at Baylor, Barbara Jordan influenced the history of our institution in another way. In 1956, Baylor made history by hosting the first racially integrated college debate tournament in the southern United States. A young black student from Texas Southern University won first place in the junior division in oratory and third place in extemporaneous speaking. That student was none other than Barbara Jordan. This was just the beginning of her tenure as a celebrated public speaker, as demonstrated by her auspicious career in the Texas Senate and the United States House of Representatives. We are honored to celebrate her legacy with you all today. Thank you to the Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities for allowing Baylor to host this year's event. Thank you also to Baylor's Department of Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media for their work in preparing for today's event. Award winners, congratulations again for receiving a 2021 Barbara Jordan Media Award. Keep on making a difference with the work that you do. It matters.
Dr. Mia Moody Ramirez, Professor and Chair, Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media, Baylor University. Introduction of speaker.
Hello, my name is Dr. Mia Moody Ramirez. I am the chair of the Baylor Department of Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media. It is with great pleasure that I introduce our keynote speaker, Robert F. Darden, Professor of Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media at Baylor University. We are honored to have Mr. Darden serve as tonight's keynote speaker for the 2021 Barbara Jordan Media Awards. Darden is an award-winning teacher, researcher, and author. He is widely cited, quoted, and interviewed on a variety of topics in the international and national media. He is the author of more than 24 books and hundreds of newspaper and magazine articles. His essays, features, editorials, and columns have appeared in the New York Times, the Oxford American, Christianity Today, the Dallas Morning News, Huffington Post, and hundreds of other publications. One of his most notable achievements while employed at Baylor is serving as the founder of the Black Gospel Music Restoration Project. The project is the world's largest initiative to identify, acquire, scan, digitize, catalog, and make accessible America's legacy of vinyl from gospel music's golden age. The Black Gospel Project provides the gospel music for the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. In addition to the acclaim he has garnered for his work on the Black Gospel Project, Bob is one of the most awarded professors at Baylor University. He has received many of the university's teaching and research awards, including Outstanding Teacher for the College of Arts and Sciences, the Diversity Award twice, once as an individual and once for the Black Gospel Project, the Cornelia Marshall Smith Award for Outstanding Professor at Baylor University, Outstanding Researcher for the College of Arts and Sciences, the Wacoan of the Year Award by the Wacoan Magazine in 2011, the Distinguished Alumni of the Year Award by the Baylor Line Foundation, and the Master Teacher Award. And most recently, Bob was selected by the Minnie Stevens Piper Foundation as a Piper Professor for the state of Texas. Today, Bob is going to share with you some of his strategies for overcoming one of his childhood obstacles. At the end of his presentation, he has a special treat for you that I am sure you're going to enjoy. Thank you for joining us today.
Robert Darden, Professor, Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media, Baylor University. Keynote speaker.
Hi. Thank you, Dr. Mia. This is, of course, a real honor for me to be here. I've always considered Barbara Jordan one of my heroes and have read extensively about her and continue to be inspired by the legacy she left us. My name's Robert Darden, and I promise I won't keep you long, but there are a few things I would really like to talk about on this day and amid all these extraordinary award winners, many of which I've read and listened to. So if you'll forgive me, I would like to share a PowerPoint, not so much because there's notes on it I want you to take, but because, in fact, you'd probably rather look at the pictures than look at my face. I had the great fortune to grow up in the United States Air Force. It's probably the best place in the world for somebody who wants to be a storyteller. Moving every couple of years meant we met an entirely new set of people, made new friends, and maybe most importantly, I got a chance to reinvent myself each time. The problem was, at least for my parents, I was a pretty unruly kid. I was in trouble all the time. I didn't pay attention in class. I looked outside the windows. I read when I should have been reading and daydreamed all the time. And it wasn't until about 1964 that the United States Air Force, under the leadership of President Johnson, began mandatory hearing and vision tests for all the kids. Well, maybe you remember these little booths. Ours was in an old warehouse somewhere, maybe it was an aircraft hangar. Booth big enough for a little kid, a funny panel of knobs, and sitting outside a audiologist or a doctor and my mother. And they slapped the big headphones on me and said through the microphone, "Little Bobby, you let us know when you hear these tones. Raise your finger each time you hear a tone." Well, this was pretty cool. So I sat there patiently and waited for the tones. And waited and waited. And as my mother tells me, finally, I looked outside and saw her in tears. It seems that I hadn't heard any of the tones. And as the later test showed, that I was virtually deaf in my right ear with less than 5% residual hearing and under 40% in the other ear. But you know, the thing about being a kid is, who grows up with this sort of thing, is you learn pretty quickly to adapt. I read lips. I started reading lips at a young age. I still watch TV way too often without the sound on. I stand close to people, probably uncomfortably close in some cases. I have all kinds of adaptive strategies where I would sit on the front row in every class and teachers thought I was particularly attentive to everything they said and probably got praise I didn't deserve. It was because I was desperately trying to hear what they said. And different hearing aids didn't work through the years, partly because I was a rough and tumble kid, partly because they amplified everything at the same volume, which meant the kid behind me jangling his keys or playing with papers was as loud as whatever the teacher said. So it wasn't until my 60s that I actually got the hearing aids that helped me to the point where I felt comfortable even in the classroom having discussion. It also meant I became a reader, a voracious reader, and more in love with story. And whatever else it did for me, it led me to journalism, the telling of other people's stories, listening to other people intently, and telling their stories, good and bad, sad and happy, male and female, black and white. Story is at the heart of everything I wanted to do. And I still consider it a sacred calling. And why I still teach in part today is because I considered this a sacred call, and I want to share that with my students. And I have a great job at Baylor teaching journalism. I only get kids who can write or think they can write. My colleagues in other departments do all the heavy lifting. And almost uniformly, the one thing they want to do is change the world. And how do you change the world? I tell them, well, story. Telling other people's stories, seeing how other people got over, how they survived, how we're still standing, and how we can make a difference. I wasn't particularly aware of the issues of those who are differently abled any more than anyone else. I'm sure I use language in my stories or even in my daily life that people would find uncomfortable today. And it happened on a vacation to the United Kingdom. If you've been in London, you know some of those underground tube stations are way down, multiple escalators down. And the Brits have a way of different posters along the course of it. And one of the posters I'll never forget because I saw it all that week there. It was of a smiling young boy with Down syndrome. And it said something like, his mates called him Timmy. When are you going to quit calling him Mongoloid? And it was like a light bulb went off. I can see it to this day. I wish I could find it to share it with you. But then since then, I've been, I hope, conscious and remain conscious of the different ways that people in their own choices think of themselves and ask that I think of them. And how when I tell their stories, how I share that story and the words I use and the phrases I coin. Newspapers probably should have been at the forefront of all of this awareness of language. I know there's some people who demean it and say it's political correctness or say any number of things, being woke. I say it's being human. And newspapers should have been at the beginning in the terms for gender and race. We really weren't, but maybe we're better now. That the self-respect, the respect, the dignity of other people to be termed in such ways that reflects who they are as individuals, as people, rather than to be defined only by their gender, their race, and their different abilities, I think is at the very heart of what journalists have a calling to do, to set the standard, to set the stage for the rest of the world, to be the examples of how this could and should be done. One of the things that has really helped me, and perhaps you've seen these, it's from the Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities. And it's a list of what, as journalists, we should say when referring to people and what we shouldn't say. And the list, when I first got it, was pretty humbling because I found out just as a lazy default, I use sometimes some of these terms. And it hurt somebody, I'm sure, maybe a lot of people. But when you put people first, as the handout says, rather than defining them in a very narrow way, then you are fulfilling this calling of communication, of uplifting, of expanding what it is it means to be human, not by defining, but being more inclusive and frankly, being more accurate. And the list is pretty long, and some of it's pretty damning. And I hope if you get a chance, you'll ask for a copy of that, because it seems to me that it's at the forefront of we could be and should always be doing as people who others read. And when other stories are told, we're at the ones who have that vehicle to share it. Maybe, just maybe, some other little kid named Timmy is not going to have to listen to that ever again. So I promised this wouldn't be long, but what I didn't promise was I wouldn't play a piece of music. And so if the technology gods are with me, I'd like to do just that. I'd like to tell you a true story about a Texan born at the turn of the last century in the little village of Pendleton between Temple and Waco. Thanks to the good work of scholar Micah Corcoran, we know more about Blind Willie Johnson now than we did even a year ago. And there isn't much, I'm sorry to say. Little Willie Johnson, born of former slaves. His father was apparently a rounder and not the most faithful of men. At age 6, his mother comes home and finds his father with another man, and according to the story, she picked up a handy bucket of lye that they used for cleaning and threw it at the father, and it missed. And instead, it splashed little Willie in the face, burning out his eyes. So now he's black, now he can't see, now he's desperately poor when he's in the Jim Crow South. Like so many young African Americans, he has really only a few options, and one of them is music. Just like Ray Charles and Arizona Drains and Blind Lemon Jefferson and so many others, he devotes the next few years to trying to figure out how to play a handmade guitar, which according to one story, made with leftover piano wire and a cigar box, standing outside of churches and honky-tonks, learning songs, maybe writing a few of his own, and then standing on street corners in towns like Marlin and Mart and Waco and Navasota, College Station, sometimes in competition with other singers, standing with a little tin cup tied to their guitar and singing these songs. About in the 1930s, at some point, there becomes this rage for race music, and smart entrepreneurs come down to the South with their talent scouts and listening for the authentic sound of African Americans, to play and record for the African Americans in the North who have fled in the Great Migration. And one such talent scout heard Blind Willie. And he took him to a studio in Dallas and recorded a dozen songs and probably gave him $25, $50. And the songs, some of them were released on 78 and did pretty well. And a year later, we think, he goes back to the studio, only this time in New Orleans, and records a few more, and they sell well. Until the Great Depression, and one by one, the labels folded, and the records go out of print and are distributed. And we lose sight of Blind Willie until somewhere in the early 1940s. And apparently he has relocated to Beaumont with his wife. And they have a little tar paper shack off Forest Avenue. And they move in a very cold month, I think maybe February. Cold as it hadn't been cold in a very long time. And after a hard day of singing for pennies, goes back to his tar paper shack, and apparently in his confusion in his new setting, knocks over the propane lamp that provided both light and heat. And it catches the shack on fire, and the neighbors come and put it out, dousing it with bucket after bucket of water, or so his wife once said. And finally it is put out, but now it's open to the cold, dark skies. And Blind Willie lies there on his wet bed because he's got nowhere else to go, and catches a cold, but goes out and sings the next day in the cold, and the next day in the cold turns into a flu. And by the end of the week, he can barely stand, and his wife drags him to the one hospital, but they don't serve people of his skin color. And Blind Willie Johnson dies And he's buried at a pauper's African-American funeral not far away near the interstate. And repeated floods of the river have washed away. We're not even sure where it is. And that would be the end of the story, like so many other stories just like it through the last couple hundred years of American history. Shameful, sad, but not uncommon, I'm sorry to say. But here's the good news. It doesn't end there. It doesn't end there because those 78s, those few 78s that Blind Willie recorded, were handed around from friend to friend in the musician's world, and they studied it and tried to play like this man played. And with your forbearance, I'd like to play just a few minutes of one of those songs that he did record. Dark as the night, cold as the ground. So if you'll bear with me and maybe close your eyes and listen to the music of Blind Willie Johnson. But here's the good news. Maybe you know this story. In the mid-1970s, the space race continued with the creation of Voyager 1 and 2. Now, Voyager 1 and 2's one job was just to go out there, the end of the universe, and to send back whatever signals they could about whatever it was they were traveling through. No other message than that. But Carl Sagan, the great scientist and TV personality, got involved at some point, and he said, you know, we've got these two beautiful machines the height of what we can do as humanity. Wouldn't it be great if they had some kind of message in case there is something out there, in case beyond Pluto, beyond into the universe, there is somebody else, something else that finds these. And so they talked and discussed and came up with different ways, and they realized the best technology at the time was a record, an LP, a piece of vinyl, that if you put it in gold to handle the absolute zero of space and left instructions, including a needle, on how to play it, that message could give whatever's out there a sound of what it was like on Earth on these days. So yes, there was other text messages put on the Voyagers, but they met and had multiple committees, and over a long period of time included different messages and greetings of peace from the different world leaders at the time. And they said, you know, we still got time, we ought to put music, maybe our highest achievement as humanity. So they got and met, and experts talked for days and weeks and decided to include snippets of a Beethoven symphony and drum music from West Africa, and the sounds of pan pipes and the sounds of waterfalls and all kinds of wonderful music, and the musicians who had made it. And they still had time for a little music from the 20th century, and they argued and came up with a jazz solo, I think, by Louis Armstrong. And they talked to the guitarist, what would be the other last piece of music that you would include? And somehow on a consensus, there came Dark as the Night, Cold in the Ground is what the best of what we are as a species could sound like, the soul and heart of one person, blind and dismissed and demeaned in life. He captured the very best of what we could be in just 3 minutes with nothing more than a battered guitar. And that's what happened. And the Voyagers are still going, by the way. There was a big report from them a few months ago. They had gone farther than anything made by humanity had ever gone, and were still sending back signals of what it was like now in outer space. And I hope in God's economy they are found. And it would make me smile to know that some creatures we can't conceive of are listening and understanding something about this goofy planet we're on, full of its hate and prejudices, and it was made by Blind Willie Johnson. That gold record will be playable, hopefully then, for all time, to know what the best of us could be. And so I don't know how to close this any other way than to say we're all on a hero's journey. Blind Willie, every one of us, as we go and try to endure and hopefully learn and improve and become better people on there. And for that to happen, we can't leave anybody behind. We don't know the gifts that different people have, that within an unlikely human shell, there may be the next extraordinary Blind Willie Johnson or Einstein. There may be the next president. There may be the next great artist. They're all there. And until we get to the point that we realize that all of us are heroes, then all of us deserve the same kind of respect in our language and in our spoken word and in our printed word, we'll never really achieve our true calling. And that, I believe, is journalism's sacred call still, to make sure if anybody is doing this right, we are, not just in our own lives, not just in what we write, but in the stories we tell. The stories we tell of people who are differently and wonderfully abled and have this entire universe of wisdom and beauty to share. That's what I'd like to see for us, and I think that is the message of Barbara Jordan. Thank you.
Written print. Simone Carter. Disability Rights Advocates Vigil honors unseen and unheard voices. Denton Record Chronicle. Denton.
Simone Carter, Denton Record Chronicle. Disability Rights Advocates Vigil honors unseen and unheard voices. North Texas disability rights advocates called for greater autonomy for people with disabilities Saturday evening during a virtual candlelight vigil. The event, titled Unheard, also honored the 445 people currently institutionalized at the Denton State Supported Living Center. Val Vera, a disability justice activist, said people with disabilities need equal rights now more than ever. While the coronavirus pandemic has amplified the voices of some, such as healthcare workers, renters, and small business owners, people with disabilities remain largely overlooked. Now, let's be clear, Vera said. The pandemic did not cause institutional oppression. It simply revealed it. Self-advocate Beverly Black lived at Denton State School when she was a teenager. She said she yearned for more independence during her time there and was not allowed to take showers on her own. Black said she hated the institution so much that she once escaped on a horse, riding back to her family's farm in Cleburne. She was then readmitted to the institution against her will. Now in her 60s, Black lives in her own home with her husband, Wayne. She said she would hate it if she were ever forced to return to the state school. No way, Black said. I enjoy my freedom. But to receive these autonomy-enhancing services, one must first sign up on a so-called waiver interest list. Some people with disabilities have been waiting for more than 11 years on such lists, according to disability rights website Texas Medicaid Waiver. Currently, there are 156,161 Texans on the list. Cindy Pascal, co-chair of the Free Our People project, said these impossible wait times are another example of discrimination against people with disabilities. Meanwhile, those who live in institutions remain largely invisible to the public. We simply cannot allow this to continue, Pascal said. We must take steps to create change to give our disabled sisters and brothers a chance to be heard.
Hi there. My name is Simone Carter, and I'm a reporter for the Dallas Observer. But I'm speaking to you today because of a story that I wrote last year for the Denton Record Chronicle, one that has apparently earned me a Barbara Jordan Media Award from the esteemed Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. This is the first award I have ever received for my work in journalism, and to say that it's an incredible honor would be a severe understatement. I'd like to thank the committee and the judges for their consideration, as well as Alex Bradley with the Self-Determination Group for the nomination. Whenever I write stories, I always do my best to portray my sources in a way that is fair and accurate, and that is exactly what I tried to do with this story. North Texans with disabilities are productive members of society, but far too often their voices go unheard. It's so important that people with disabilities are recognized for the integral roles that they play in the communities in which they live. This pandemic has been tough on everyone, and the same can certainly be said for me. I was so surprised when I learned that I'd received the Barbara Jordan Media Award, and let me tell you, it has made my entire year. Thank you again to the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities for this award, and thank you for the important work that you do. I am beyond humbled and inspired by your extraordinary service.
Special contribution, written print. Texas School for the Deaf Annual Report, 2019-2020. You belong here. Texas School for the Deaf revamped its annual report to make it easier to read by including infographics. Additionally, the publication adopted the use of a QR code, making the publication innovative. The 2019-2020 school year at Texas School for the Deaf began with professional development, a welcome back celebration, and shared goals focused on teaching and learning. We paid attention to ongoing work in the fourth year of our 5-year strategic plan as we prepared to collectively engage in the important work of providing an outstanding education for all our students. We set a course to develop a new multi-year strategic plan and sought to collect a myriad of survey data, revisit the mission, vision, and establish core beliefs. This was accomplished by the end of February with our very successful school community planning team. Then, on March 13, 2020, we responded to an unprecedented crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic that impacted our lives in profound ways. Our beliefs? Education is a partnership between students, family, school, and community. Early language acquisition is critical to a deaf child's social, emotional, and cognitive development. The development of the whole person socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, and emotionally is imperative to a positive identity, self-worth, and lifelong success. American Sign Language and English are woven into the fabric of TSD life, building healthy deaf identities and positive self-worth. An interdisciplinary curriculum that integrates technology in academically engaging learning environments prepares students to become critical thinkers, collaborators, and decision makers. Outreach services provide resources and support to the state's deaf and hard of hearing students, their families, and the professionals that serve them. Showing students, families, and staff dignity and respect in an inclusive community that values diverse abilities, needs, and interests is crucial to creating a healthy, safe, and welcoming environment.
Thank you so much to the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities for selecting our annual report as a winner in the Special Contribution Written Print category. As with many projects being honored here, it is never the work of one person. I have to recognize our graphic artist and publications specialist, our public information officer, and the amazing staff and students that help tell our story each year. Our theme for this annual report was, "You Belong Here." This theme is based on the notion that everyone is welcome here at TSD, and that TSD is a place to learn, grow, and belong. In our annual report, we took a required agency document and made it tell a story. We relied on pictures, infographics, and tables to convey a lot of the information. The visuals count as much, if not more, than the words in our community. One of the goals in the annual report is to communicate a sense of what campus life is like for the 500 plus students that attend school here every day, as well as the students, parents, and professionals we serve statewide. Humanizing the work we do is very important. Finally, we want our annual report to show what deaf students can achieve when a community focuses on their abilities rather than their disabilities. In closing, thank you for this award and the opportunity to have our community shine.
Photojournalism. Despite accident that changed his life, Bowie's Evan Mallett has reason to be thankful. Austin American statesman. Photos by Ricardo B. Brazil. Evan's father, Mike Mallett, along with Alex Leonard, a physical therapy assistant, and Ivana Cavazos, a physical therapy tech, help Evan Mallett get into a standing formation during a physical therapy session. Evan Mallett works on his homework after his therapy session with his father, Mike. Evan Mallett hits a balloon as one of his exercises, while his father, Mike, tries his best to block the balloon during Evan's therapy session. Evan Mallett gets snacks with friends Matt Garcia, Colton Benson, and Tyson Benson during halftime of a Bowie High School football game. Colton Benson looks at Evan Mallett while they hang out with friends at a Bowie High School football game. Evan Mallett looks on with friends at a Bowie High School football game. Evan Mallett hangs out with friends at a Bowie High School football game.
Hello, my name is Ricardo Brazil. I'm a photojournalist at the Austin American-Statesman. I've been here for about 18, going on 19 years. It is my honor, and I'm very humbled to be able to receive this Barbara Jordan Award for everything that she stood for the little people to the big people, and for also the disadvantaged and the people that struggles within everyday life. More so, I'm very honored to be able to tell or help tell Evan's story. Evan, kid that lost, to me, it seems like everything, but he is still striding and leading and striding on just to be the person that he is. And that is more important than anything else. And I'm so honored to be able to do a story that highlights him, and also that highlights that he's just a regular person just like you and I. And that's the best thing that I can come away with that, and for this work to be recognized, for other people to be able to see people like Evan, that's really great. So I am very honored to be able to receive this award, and thank you for being able to see my work.
College student Andre Williams, the Daily Texan. UT must be proactive in outreach for disability accommodations. Success on campus isn't simply the result of hard work. For students with disabilities, having proper resources is instrumental in achieving success. The role of Services for Students with Disabilities, SSD, is providing these students the necessary resources while at UT. That involves working with students to determine and put in place academic accommodations for classrooms and exams, SSD Assistant Director Emily Shryock said. It also involves working with faculty and staff to make sure those accommodations are provided for them. SSD works with new student services to reach students at UT orientation. When registering for orientation, students are asked if they need accommodations to participate and are provided with information if they do. Methods of outreach leave some students without the necessary information to receive help. Like many students, Autumn Lanning, History and Government sophomore, was not reached by those outreach initiatives. I learned about accommodations for the first time this year because I have another friend that is chronically ill, and they were telling me about them, Lanning said. That's when I started looking to see what accommodations I could get, so my grade wouldn't suffer from things out of my control. I applaud the ongoing initiatives by SSD and New Student Services to make UT more inclusive and accessible, but we can always do more. It is time to be explicit and loud when talking about the availability of accommodations for students with disabilities. All students, regardless of their disability status, should have to undergo an informative lesson about disabilities and disability accommodations on campus. We require incoming students to learn about alcohol abuse and other topics. We need to make this a requirement too. Along with this, faculty and staff must have mandatory SSD training so they know when to reach out to students in need. Accommodations are not prizes or rewards that should be earned. They are a basic necessity for student success. Who are we as a campus, as a community, if we promote the success of some but are apathetic to the needs of others? Students with disabilities deserve the opportunity to thrive just as much as other Longhorns.
Hi, I'm Andre Williams, a fourth-year international business major at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm honored to be a recipient of a Barbara Jordan Media Award. My column, UT Must Be Proactive in Outreach for Disability Accommodations, is one that was very close to my heart. It was actually part of a series I wrote advocating for better accommodations policy at UT. Last semester, while talking about end-of-course grades with my mom, I actually found myself emotional. I wasn't emotional about my performance. Rather, I was frustrated with how difficult it had been to simply get my professor to acknowledge and uphold my accommodations in the classroom. This isn't a singular struggle though. This is a problem that students with disabilities all around Texas and all around the country encounter. Thank you to the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities for acknowledging the work that people in media do to help create more equitable and inclusive policies for people with disabilities all around the world. I plan to continue to fight to uplift and fight for more inclusive and equitable policies for students and people with disabilities, not only at UT, but all around my community.
High school student. Elena Amon, Seminole High School. Freshman's passion to play outweighs disease. At the age of 7, freshman Hudson Harper found his love for basketball. He dribbled and threw the ball for years, even when his body was diagnosed with a disease that would stop most. He continued to play basketball despite being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes almost 5 years ago. I have been checking my blood sugar and taking insulin since the day I was diagnosed. Since then, Harper has learned to manage his diabetes. He also learned a process to monitor and take care of his health before and during basketball games. I check my blood sugar 1 to 2 hours before the game to see if I either need to eat something or take insulin, Harper said. I also eat differently on game days and consume not as many carbs. Harper wears a Dexcom, which is a continuous glucose monitor that updates his blood sugar every 7 minutes. Hudson never calls attention to himself or looks for sympathy due to his diabetes, JV basketball coach Tanner Moore said. He doesn't allow any setback to ever get him down or to stop him from finding a way to change the outcome of the game. Harper said that his parents are his biggest supporters. Harper's mentor is his father. He has always been my coach, and for summer basketball, he still is my coach, Harper said. He always finds ways to help me improve my health and my basketball game. Harper looks for the positives. Diabetes is different every day, Harper said. I can do the exact same thing one day and it will work, then do the same thing the next day and it doesn't work. I just choose to keep a positive mindset and keep pushing forward. Harper said diabetes is an ongoing thing every second of every day, and he has to stay on top of it. Despite the risk of playing basketball with diabetes, Harper has an optimistic outlook. I don't want to let diabetes control my life at all, Harper said. Instead, I control it.
Hi, my name is Elena Amon, and I'm a senior at Seminole High School. I would like to formally thank the Governor's Office for awarding me with this year's Barbara Jordan Media Award for the Scholastic category. Barbara was a powerful and essential woman who brought change for all kinds of people in her time as a lawyer and congresswoman. In fact, she inspires me every single day of my life. I'm actually very happy that there is a chance for Scholastic journalists to receive such a prestigious award such as this. It serves as a way of saying that students have power in their words just as much as adults do. Now, I want to stress how important these stories are, and I want to thank Hudson Harper for making this type of story easy to write. He faces a debilitating autoimmune disease that doesn't stop him from playing the sport he loves, basketball. Despite each day and hour and minute being different for a kid with type 1 diabetes, he doesn't let it get him down. He's an inspiration to athletes and to anyone who perhaps suffers from a similar disability that is considered invisible. It is important for people with disabilities to be remembered not for their disability, but for their ability. They should not be remembered for how they were different or how they were disabled, but rather how abled they truly are.
Broadcast. Amanda Henderson and John Henderson. Football coaches learn ASL to help hearing impaired athlete in games. News 4 SA, San Antonio.
Sky's the limit.
New tonight, coaching staff at NISD is using a new way to help a young hearing impaired athlete succeed. News Antonio's Amanda Henderson has more on what coaches decided to do and how other districts can also use it.
I knew he was going to find success on the field. It was just my job to try to get him to get there.
The sights of a football game are nothing new to NISD 7th grader Jivory Graham.
I not play sports.
It's the sounds of the game that are something different altogether.
I have to kind of how to, sign language, play football, stuff, basketball.
Graham is hearing impaired and wears a cochlear implant, an electronic device designed to help deaf and hard of hearing individuals perceive sounds. As a two-sport athlete, Graham's coaches were running into some communication issues.
I didn't feel like he was getting what I was teaching.
The coaches came up with a plan to learn ASL in order to talk and communicate with Graham about what football play was coming next for him. Some of the able-hearing players were able to see and learn some of the signs that have been communicated.
Tackle the quarterback and it just started progressing.
It's something they hope coaches across the nation will utilize if they have a deaf or hard of hearing athlete.
I think there's a lot of good coaches out there that'll find ways to help every kid.
It's kind of cool that people are helping me how to play sports.
Whether you see Graham on the football field or the basketball court, you'll see a different form of communication, and it's one that makes all the difference to him.
Any people that have disability, never be afraid to show your talent.
Coach Lambert says they were able to learn from a local ASL teacher. So if you're interested in learning more about the language, we have some links for you on our website, news4sanantonio.com. Amanda Henderson, back to you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Henderson, and it is such an honor to be one of the winners of this year's Barbara Jordan Media Awards. Barbara Jordan is an incredible woman who has left such a lasting impact and legacy for myself and others. This year we got to cover the story of Givery Graham and his coaches who learned ASL. Givery is hard of hearing, but he's also a talented and gifted two-sport athlete. Getting to hear from Coach Dave Lambert about why he decided to learn ASL was something that showed me an example of good coaching and also a willingness to learn. We were able to work with NISD, Givery, and Coach Lambert to put this story together, so I want to offer all of them my thanks. I also want to say thank you to John Henderson. He's the photojournalist who helped shoot and edit this story. He is also nominated and won this alongside of me, so a big thank you to him and all of his hard work. It's my hope that we can continue to do stories like this that leave an impact, a positive impact, for people and for those who are watching.
Podcast. Dr. John C. Bullion and Pam Humphrey. Don't be afraid to be included. ESC Region 12, SPED Talk.
So I'm excited, Pam. Got Cammie back and she's got a guest with her.
So, Cammie, who's your guest?
This is Simon Guzman. He's a senior at Brady High, and he's a member of our Unified Club and our traditional Special Olympics team.
Hello, Simon. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. So, Simon, so you're part of the Unified team?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Which sports?
Bocce, bowling, powerlifting, and track.
So how much can you power lift?
210 on deadlift.
On deadlift.
That is impressive.
Yes, he's super strong. He's the reason we have powerlifting. It wasn't one of the original sports that we started for Special Olympics, and he came up freshman year.
When I was little, I think about 8 or 9, I saw my brother powerlifting and deadlifting and doing those squat things. I figured when I get into high school, I want to follow his footsteps. I want to bring powerlifting into the Special Olympics. So that's why I come up to Miss Dodds and ask her if we can do it. It's not all about winning on these sports. It's about having fun. But other people think it's about winning, and that I don't like. I'm not being a hater about it. I said don't like people think sports are about winning. It's only about having fun. If we're powerlifting, you can get back in shape.
I don't know that I've ever heard Simon say no when he's been offered an opportunity. So homecoming committee, he's on it. Caroling around campus, he's on it. But let me tell you what, freshman year, if we would have asked Simon to go caroling, he would have stared at us and he would have went and sat down and buried his head.
Yeah, that's how it was.
He would not have said a word or gone anywhere. And now he's all over campus singing to random people. And it's been fun to watch him grow from super, super quiet and shy to sign me up, I'm in.
I mean, this is more than Special Olympics. I mean, this young man exemplifies leadership and a willingness to take risk. I mean, to put himself out there and to create the wheelchair swing and as well as caroling. It sounds like no does not exist in his vocabulary.
Not that I know of.
It doesn't.
No, he's.
That's the one word I do not like is no.
I learned at an early age that everyone has a story. And sometimes stories are not told, but definitely need to be heard. This episode of SPED Talk with Brady ISD, Cammie Dodd, and Simon Guzman allowed us to share their story about including people with disabilities.
Absolutely, Pam. And I can tell you, Pam and I are so honored to, on behalf of our SPED Talk team, be receiving this Barbara Jordan Media Award for Don't Be Afraid to Be Included, the episode of SPED Talk that was nominated and ultimately won. We are floored. We are blown away. SPED Talk really is about elevating the stories, the work, the effort, the struggle to highlight individuals with disabilities in a positive light. And this is such an honor, and we are just so blessed and thankful for the opportunity to represent so many of our friends and colleagues around the state who are really making a difference for children with disabilities in the state of Texas.
Once again, thank you for the award and for recognizing SPED Talk.
We'll see you soon.
Radio. Shelley Brisbane, full participation, 30 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Texas Standard, KUT.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. On July 26, 1990, President George H.W. Bush signed the Americans with Disabilities Act. The landmark law turns 30 this Sunday. The ADA barred discrimination against people with disabilities in housing, public accommodation, and employment. It provides protections many people may assume have always been the law of the land, but before the ADA, far more people with disabilities lived in institutional settings, had difficulty or could not enter public places, and had no recourse when denied a job. Lex Frieden was there from the beginning, in fact, before the beginning. He is director of the Independent Living Research Utilization Program at Tier Memorial Hermann Rehabilitation Institute in Houston. He's also been called one of the chief architects of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Professor Frieden, welcome to the Texas Standard.
People who can't remember that far back, or people who weren't yet born, have a hard time imagining how life was before the ADA. At that point, no one with a disability, and certainly not a mobility impairment, a sensory impairment, or a cognitive or intellectual disability could have free access. I mean, even the sidewalks had barriers. There were no curb ramps. We take that for granted today. If you went to a movie theater in a wheelchair, even if you could get in the theater itself and manage to find yourself a space in the aisle, the fire department would come and move you away because you were a fire hazard. And if you tried to get into a university, you might be told the university has a policy that will not accept people with disabilities. The vision of ADA is full participation by people with disabilities in our economy, in our society, in our schools, in our workplace, and so on.
Hi, I'm Shelley Brisbane. I'm a producer for the Texas Standard, a statewide public radio news show. I want to thank the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities for recognizing my story, Full Participation, about the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We were pleased to interview Dr. Lex Frieden, who is one of the acknowledged architects of the ADA, and someone who could speak not only about what the ADA does today, but how it came to be and why it was so important that it become law. Dr. Frieden talked about Vietnam veterans with disabilities who came home only to find that public accommodation did not meet their needs. He talked about physical barriers that prevented people in wheelchairs from even moving down a sidewalk. And he talked about the ongoing challenge of employment for people with disabilities that continues even today. Dr. Frieden was very generous with his time, and I want to thank him as well as our host David Brown, who conducted a probing and thoughtful interview, and I want to thank the rest of the Texas Standard team who supported me in working on this project. Thanks, of course, to the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities for continuing to recognize media's work to shine a light on people with disabilities and their contributions to Texas.
Special contribution broadcast. Craig Davis, Counting All My Children. Texas State Independent Living Center.
Counting All My Children. Scene opens with Linda May and Sue Ellen finishing brunch in Sue Ellen's home.
As always, brunch was most delicious, my dear. Oh my goodness! Why are you crying?
I can never lie to you, Linda May. It's that rascal JP. It's like I just don't count anymore.
Don't be silly. Of course you count. Especially in the 2020 census. Every year, more than $800 billion, and that's with a B, is sent to the states, counting everyone in Texas. It's especially important for people like us with disabilities. See, so you do count.
I had no idea. Just feels like it's just too late for me, Linda May.
It absolutely is not too late for you, Sue Ellen. The Census Bureau has extended,
and now Linda May will talk in government speak,
the self-response phase deadline to October 31st. In fact, let's go to 2020census.gov and complete it right now.
Minutes later.
You're almost done. Now, all you have to do is hit submit and...
Not so fast. Don't you hit that submit button yet. We have some issues we need to talk about your 2020 census. Linda May, meet my evil twin sister Odessa Louise.
Gas!
And now a scene from our next episode of Counting All My Children.
Honey, do you think I just came in your door just today? I've been here before April 1st, 2020. I demand to be counted on your census. Do you really just not care about the future funding of Texas?
To be continued.
Hi, my name is Craig Davis. I work for the Texas State Independent Living Council, and I'm the creator of Counting on My Children. I would like to thank the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, the judges, and all those involved that have now made Counting on My Children the award-winning piece that it now is. I got the idea for Counting on My Children by watching Dallas, and my dog's name is Sue Ellen, and well, those dots just connected themselves. I do comedy writing in my personal life, and so when it came time to pitch ideas for this, we wanted to do something that was entertaining, but yet also had great information in it. We wanted to let people know like specific things about like when deadlines were, what sites they can go to, and to give them like a call to action to actually complete the 2020 census, but yet also be funny and put in those over-the-top soap opera, soap opera elements into it. But I think one of the things that really helped this land was the production value that Linda Letowski with Channel Austin and her crew added.
My name is Linda Letowski, and I was a producer on Counting All My Children, and I have to say it was a blast. To the entire crew, Tessa Goodnight and Orlando Lopez, who made it all happen, to the actresses, Nikki and Kristen, who themselves were people with disabilities, I want to thank everyone, and especially Craig. This was a wonderful way to present some pretty dry information, and working collaboratively with the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities, with Art Texas, with Texas Silk, and as a volunteer for Rev Up Texas, we all had a really good time putting something out that not only made you laugh, but made you think, and also to give you information about the 2020 census. Thank you very much to the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, and it is a great honor after 40 years of working with people with disabilities to accept the Barbara Jordan Award. Thank you very much.
I am delighted that these persons who are recipients of these awards today understand the reality that is important, crucial, urgent. that it be communicated.
The Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities 38th Annual Barbara Jordan Media Awards 2021. Thank you to our partners, Baylor University and the Journalism, Public Relations, and New Media program in the College of Arts and Sciences. Thank you to Robert Darden, our keynote speaker. A special thank you to all of our nominees and award winners. Without your excellent work, these awards would not be possible. As always, be sure to keep a lookout throughout the year for outstanding media produced on people with disabilities for our 2022 Barbara Jordan Media Awards.